I'm Sue Anstiss, and this is The Game Changers, the podcast where I talk to trailblazing women in sport who are literally knocking down barriers to challenge the status quo for women and girls everywhere. We've turned the tables a little for this special episode, and to celebrate the publication of my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport, this time it's me as the guest, with Sky Sports' Hannah Wilkes asking the questions. In another first, this podcast was also recorded in front of a live audience at Leaders Week in London. So, over to Hannah.
So Sue, let's dive straight in. You are a founding trustee of the Women's Sport Trust, co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective, podcast host, published author now as well. It all comes down to sport. It's all to do with sport and women's sport for you. So I want to know, was sport part of your life growing up?
Yeah, you probably might not be surprised to know it very much was part of my life growing up. So quite a sporty family. My dad was a PT instructor in the Metropolitan Police, and my mum was really sporty. It's interesting that it's only really recent. I read Billie Jean King's autobiography actually in the last couple of weeks, All In, which is fantastic recommendation if you haven't read it yet. But she talked about her mother, and people ask me about my family, I often talk about my dad, and I haven't really talked about my mum. But actually, she was 5'10", she used to swim, she ran. I went to the same school as her, and my name was on the school cup after hers. But actually, growing up, she played a bit of tennis. She was quite active, but she never really did much sport. And I think she was obviously in that era, being born in the 1930s, when she did what was seen as feminine. But I think, goodness me, she could have been the most extraordinary athlete, and that she had height and clearly passion for sport too. So yes, a very sporty family, 3 brothers, and we all kind of played sport and followed sport. And I think for me, it was just normalised that sport was within our family.
So quite a key part of family life.
Yes, grandstand on the television, every opportunity, at every meal time, so yeah.
So what sports did you try, and which ones did you fall in love with, and which did you think, this isn't for me?
I swam. I said quite late to swimming, but I love swimming, and that's probably where I progressed the furthest to national championships and so on as a youngster, 11, 12. And then I moved on to track and field. So my older brother, he was an international decathlete and pole vaulter actually, so I joined the athletics club to be with him. So I did a bit of track and field, so running at 800 until I realised I was not quite the right build for 800, so then 4 and 4 hurdles. And then like any, I guess, young woman of that time, I played netball, I played lots of sports in school, and yeah, which when I went to Loughborough, that's when I kind of moved on. I discovered volleyball, sort of getting there and realising you needed to be of a really high level of sport to play in the netball team, so I kind of took up something completely new.
I had the same realisation when I got to Loughborough. Oh. No way I was going to get
anywhere
near that team. So how important do you think it was? And when talking to athletes as well, we know that a sporty family and a supportive family is so key. How important do you think it was to ignite that passion for sport in the family setup?
Yeah, I do wonder if they hadn't been, would I have just been a sporty girl anyway? And I think I wasn't typical at school of, it's an all-girls school, and that they weren't other girls that were as sporty as me. There were sports, but there weren't girls coming in with wet hair in the morning from early morning swimming or that activity. So I just think it was very normal in our family. And I look at I've got 3, not teenage, but older than teenage now, daughters. And I look at our family, and we're not very musical, and we're not really into dance and whatever. And I love watching sports. That weekend we went to watch the eldest play rugby out in Reading. And actually that's a joy for us to go and watch her play rugby. Whereas if I was going to watch maybe arts or dance or something else, it wouldn't have had the same appeal. So I think the family life, and I think that's what you probably see, isn't it? We just normalised being sporty. And I don't think I was ever treated differently to my brothers in terms of sport. I think it was, we just all played sport.
Well, you mentioned your brothers. You're a twin, actually. Your twin is male. You didn't see then any difference in sort of how you were treated at home in terms of sport, but what about when you were at school or at sports clubs? Did you see any difference based on gender?
Yeah, I don't think so actually. You look back and I kind of look for it to think, was there any kind of bias in direction? I don't think there was particularly, and I'm sure underlying there may have been, but I don't feel that there was. I think we played sports quite equally, we were treated quite equally. Yeah,
that's always good to hear.
Yeah.
Did you see a relationship change with sport as you grow up? Because we hear so much now about that ever lower age where girls in particular drop off and stop participating in sport. Did yours change as you went through your teens and your 20s?
I think it did. It's interesting, I talked to Holly Bradshaw recently for a lovely interview that we did in the Telegraph, but around women's kit and clothing and women's body and body image. And actually, as I talked to her, it's a bit of a confessional, but as I talked to her, I remembered a point at which I was doing athletics and being in the car on the way home with an athletics coach and his daughter, and him saying to me, well, you're clearly never going to be a middle distance runner, are you? You just haven't got the body for it. And I'd hit puberty, so I was only probably 12, 13, and my body shape had changed, and that stayed with me. And he's probably stating it was very, very factual. I wasn't going to be, and I was doing some cross country, and I was never going to be a skinny mini like the little girls that were passing me by. But that's kind of stayed with me, that how I judged my size then and what I was able to do, and I'd moved down to more. And I joke about it now. I'm a power athlete, not built for endurance, etc. So it is interesting how that stays with you through that time. So I think probably that individual sport when I was younger, swimming, running, and then netball, and just I love team sport. So the volleyball that I love, and I've almost gone full circle now, and I'm back to walking netball. So I started walking netball a couple of weeks ago. Oh my God, it's amazing. It's really tough. But that being with a team again and playing and excited to play once a week, etc. So I think the team bit is probably what's changed rather than just purely the individual sport and activity.
You did though compete to triathlon at a high level in your 40s. So when did you start? Yeah. Why did you start? What suddenly made you go, I'm going to do triathlon now?
I think probably always had it in my head. I mentioned my elder brother. I think that whole him having had a GB vest, and I was never as good as him. So I think probably had a little bit in my head of someday I'd like to pull on that GB vest. So, and I thought, I could do it. Age group athletes, you can do it in triathlon and athletics too. I don't really know how I started. It's a challenge, and I did a sprint triathlon and thought, actually, I did swim and I did run. How hard can it be to jump on a bike and clip on and off? It's quite hard. So I think it was almost like putting those three together and just enjoying it and thinking there was an opportunity. But for me, I'm a bit either full on or not at all. And I think during that period, I just got completely into it. Yeah, really loved it.
Despite how to clip onto a bike, what did you learn about yourself when you were competing triathlon?
I'm quite competitive.
No.
Yeah, I think it is that it was that competitive side. I did love the triathlon. Actually, the age group thing, I think that really supportive, and it may be the same within men's age group triathlon too. I don't know if it is, but that whole other women supporting and bringing on that sort of kind of really nice side of it. I enjoyed the training. I think it's really easy to get overly, not addicted to it, but I think triathlon, unlike many sports, because there's 3 different components and you could just train for any one of those almost full time, it's really easy so I ended up training twice a day, 6-7 days a week. It's just really easy to, not to overtrain, but just to completely get absorbed in it. So probably that, in my own nature, I realised that I am, either completely full on or doing nothing at all.
So now it's walking netball?
Walking netball and swimming and open water swimming, yeah.
So sport's still very much part of your life, but not as all-consuming as triathlon.
Yeah, no, and just much more stuff that's enjoyable. Follow the joy is a bit of a statement I like to bandy around, but just to do the things you enjoy. So even the swimming now, so I do open water swimming, but I don't wear my Garmin or my Polar watch. I just want to go in and enjoy it and just be with other people and enjoy it from that side. And that's quite different, I think, to how I've enjoyed sport in the past.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? Just to find something you love to do. Let's talk about business, because aside from being a very busy athlete, you have built a huge career in sport. When did you start working in sport?
So I studied sport, books and games at Loughborough. I did PE and English at Loughborough, and I worked for Cadbury's for a couple of years in sales, selling chocolate out the back of my car, but more because I wanted to get into sports marketing, and people said actually that was a good place to go and get experience at a blue chip company. So I started working for Gatorade, the American sports drink, and they were due to launch in the UK. So I did 2-3 years there, building up all their credibility in terms of reputation with national sports teams, but also lots of professional football clubs in 92, 93. And they didn't launch in the UK in the end, but that was almost, I realised at the time, I was almost in my dream job at 24. I thought I could do this for the rest of my life, travelling the world literally, and going to sports events and marketing the product. It was just fantastic. And then it all came to a bit of an end as they didn't launch in the UK. So I was made redundant at 26, which at the time was a bit of a a shock. And I think now probably there's more redundancy around. I think then in the 90s, it was like, well, that doesn't have no smoke without fire. What's gone on there? That I had that feeling of, it didn't feel right that I would not have a job to go to. And that's when I then launched my own agency. I thought, just give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? I'll go and get another job if it doesn't work out. And then, 26 years later, it just grew and progressed in terms of sports PR and then PR.
So how did you build that business? You take a chance at 26 years old, which is such a brave thing to do. What was that experience like in building that company and becoming a boss overnight?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think back to the whole early days of in my back bedroom, thinking it was like that when I'd been young and you played toy shops and you had your little sweets weighing out here, and having my own fax machine and my computer, my Rolodex and everything. So it did definitely feel a bit like that in those early days. It was fun, and I do remember just always being Bupa was one of my first clients actually for a big fitness campaign, and I remember coming back from meetings with them and staying up till really late at night in order to get the contact reports across to them. And I never wanted anyone to say, oh, she's just that girl that works out of her back bedroom in Heston. So I over-serviced, and that whole attention to detail and wanting to be as professional as you could be. And I think that stayed with us at the agency, and I probably needed to let it go a little bit towards the end. I was told to just relax, chill a bit, but I think that whole needing to get everything right and never wanting to be seen to be too casual about things came from the time of working on my own and wanting to prove myself there. So that was the early days.
So what were the highlights of that 25-year journey, and what were the really tough bits?
How long you got? So now there are lots of highlights, and I guess some of the highlights are almost the lowlights too. So I think the highlights of working with an amazing bunch of people and celebrating, so winning awards and doing great campaigns and sharing that celebration with other people is really exciting. But actually the managing people for me is the really hard part too, and that's the bit I'm really enjoying now, is not managing a team of people. I don't think I'm a particularly good manager of people, so I think that was the bit that is fantastic and joyful and lovely to share it with other people and to learn from other people and to guide them, but actually that can also be I'm sure anybody here that works with an agency, that, it's just people that can be the challenging bit too. And I think almost looking back on 25 years, as you look at, we rounded up, actually some of the campaigns we were involved with, sort of driving change and being involved with things at a time when things really were changing. And initially through fitness, we did a lot of work within the fitness sector at that time of growth of David Lloyd and Fitness First and so on, and then into sports and grassroots sports. And as an agency, we very much specialised in grassroots, when actually lots of other agencies were after. We didn't really follow the money, so we didn't really work in F1 or football and so on. We were doing very much working with national governing bodies and grassroots sport, and that's exciting when I look back and see the work that we did with the likes of hockey and netball and cricket in terms of driving participation. I'm really proud of that side.
Well, you've clearly seen a huge change, particularly in women's sport in the past 2 decades, particularly the last decade. When did driving equality in women's sport become a real passion and a real motivator for you?
I think it must have always been bubbling around, and I know that we kept taking on more female clients and doing more stuff with women's sport, and that's quite hard to balance when you've got an agency that's men and women and you want to be seen to be working across all sport. But I was finding myself, I actually just want to work in women's sport really. So I think around the time of the Women's Sport Trust getting started, so 2012, I had been doing stuff probably for 10 years before that, but that was kind of the core moment when I thought, oh, absolutely, I can see I can have some impact here, and there's so much that needs to be done. So I kind of feel it was probably around that time in the Women's Sport Trust where I was able to almost vocalise to myself, this is absolutely where I feel passionate. And actually I look back at those days I mentioned working at Gatorade, or the years historically. I think I never really saw the injustice, and I talk to women now, and lovely Laura Weston, who's on the Women's Sport Trust board with me, she's found this letter that she wrote when she was at school about the injustice of coverage in the media of women's sport when she was 11, 12, and I think, I had no idea. I think it was just as it was, and I just accepted that. And at Gatorade we worked on Leeds, Man United, Arsenal, Notts Forest at the time, sponsorship campaigns, and working with men's sport, with cricket, rugby, football. We hardly worked with any women's sport, but I didn't question it at the time. It's like, well, that's just how it was. I'm not calling out Gatorade because I've done a huge amount for women's sport since then, but I think almost in myself, it's like, well, that's kind of what was just the norm was. And so I think I would recognise in myself it's taken a while so I feel not embarrassed to say that, but it's almost taken a while to think, actually that's not acceptable, is it? So it's almost just shifting your viewpoint of things too.
You mentioned the Women's Sport Trust. You are one of the founding trustees. Can you tell us how that all started? Because there's a great story in your book actually about how the very first board meeting was just round a kitchen table, and now it's a really powerful body.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Jo Bostock and Tammy Parler that created it and founded it, and I think Kate Richardson-Watt actually was doing work experience or an internship with us at the time. We were doing some stuff through the lifestyle advisors at British Hockey, and she had just come out to see whether she wanted to do PR in the future, and they approached her actually about being a patron of the Women's Sport Trust, and she went to a meeting and I said, oh my God, that looks amazing. Can I come with you and talk? And I was suddenly really excited to talk to her. So I went to the meeting and met Jo and Tammy, and they said, oh, we need you on our board too. So that's kind of how it started. And as you say, it did start with a small passionate. Sue Day from the RFU was a fellow founding trustee with me too. And Kate Hannon, that I work with now at the Women's Sport Collective, was an early trustee as well too. So there's a few of us that have been around from those early days. And then as you say, it's evolved, and the makeup of the board has changed, and it's been super powerful. But below the radar, I think that's what I love about the Women's Sport Trust. It does have great profile, but that's not what it's about. It's about the convening, the decision makers behind the scenes to drive change, perhaps rather than loud public campaigns and consumer-facing campaigns. It's about really making a difference behind the scenes.
What are you most proud of in terms of what the Women's Sport Trust has achieved? Like you say, some of it's quite quiet, but there must be some things that you can point to and feel really proud of playing a part in.
Yeah, I think in recent years, obviously we had the Be a Game Changer Awards that were a big success and got people talking and sharing. I think some of the recent work, so the Ambition Report, the Research with Two Circles, the Unlocked campaign, helping female athletes to kind of find their voices and pairing them up with activators in business and sport and media. So I think some of the stuff that we're doing now feels like it is really, really driving. And even the research we're doing with Futures, so being the insight gatherer and then sharing that with other people around women's sport. I think there's a lot that we're doing now that's having a big impact. And you say in the book, I do use some examples. I mean, the piece, I guess, that I a strong memory of is around the grid girls and walk-on girls and the kind of calling that out. And we put our head up above the parapet at the time and wrote a statement that said why we felt it was right that sport was changing, and the negativity and vitriol we received online, and that's kind of my first experience of that, calling something out, and the media kind of pairing the Nazi feminists against the beautiful glamour girls. So that, I think that being in the whirlwind of all that, but knowing we were doing it for the right reasons, and we'd never said anyone couldn't do anything. We just wanted women to be recognised for their sporting prowess and their success rather than being an adornment to men's sport. Although actually there was such negativity, it's like, well, maybe we'll keep our heads down and just keep influencing things beneath it, beneath the waves in future.
No, always make noise, always make noise. From the outside, particularly with the last 18 months we've had it can sometimes feel a bit like women's sport is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, especially depending on what news story you're reading that day or what figures you're looking at. Is it more positive from the inside? What's the Women's Sports Trust feeling as to where women's sport is?
Hugely more positive. And I just think I think the thing for me at the moment, I think we've seen amazing sponsorship with the likes of Barclays and Vitality and others in the past, and then obviously the amazing broadcast deals with Sky and BBC on the likes of the FAWSL, but other media too. I think for now, for me, it's those things are coming together at the same time, and whether it's the sport for the code of governance from Sport England, so in terms of equality on boards, I think we're seeing all those different things coming together, and that's why I feel most excited about it now, is it's the different components coming together. It's really interesting, having been downstairs, actually a gentleman came to talk quite vociferously with me, having listened to the session this morning, but he was thinking, it's not about pay parity, it's not about any of those things, it's not about visibility, it's about governance. He was really strongly, it's about governance, about getting women at the table at the senior levels to change those decisions. Until that's done, nothing's going to change. The rest is superficial. So I'm constantly learning and listening, and it's really interesting that it's from all those different areas. And I think that's the thing I've realised. I talked for a long time about visibility. I think it's all about visibility and getting the quality product in front of people. But actually, the more I'm in it, you realise it's not one thing or another. It is all of those things coming together that will make the difference. But I feel that they are now.
Why do you think the time is now, and why do you think it's taken quite a while to get to this point?
Yeah, that's a good. If I knew the answer, no. Well, I don't think so.
What's the secret?
I think it is. I guess it is that cumulative building of things, isn't it? So it is. So although I said it's not just one thing, it is the visibility. So actually, even from the report today, people being able to see women's sport is being reported more on the news. People have been called out for not having equal coverage, whether it's on the app or the BBC roundups or whatever. So I think more women's sport, and then people watching more women's sport, and the quality coming because the sponsors and investors are coming. I think that's a piece. It is snowballing, and I do hope, I don't really like the phrase tipping point, but you think at some point there will come a time when there's so many sponsors coming in. So the fact that we've got Google, MasterCard, but I don't mean Buckers and Vitalities in an offhand way, but we know that they're doing amazing things and have done for so long. But other new sponsors coming, Adidas last night with DAZN coming into women's sports. I think the money coming in is so important. And yet you can still have lovely Lizzie Downing winning the Paris-Roubaix and only getting £1,500 when her male counterpart next day got €30,000. So like 20 times more for him than her. And so the things that are so obvious, it seems that's just ridiculous, isn't it? How can she have done the same race? And actually it's the first time in 125 years women have done that race. She doesn't need the same money. She needs 10 times the money that he won, because we've said women can't do it because they're not strong enough. Well, actually she's proved that they are, and you give her a fraction. So I guess it's like really positive that these things are moving. And what is positive though is the media calling that out, and that was in the Guardian and the Telegraph, and so loads of people have made noise about that. And I wonder whether even 10 years ago that wouldn't have been we might have celebrated that she took part and she won, but we might not have talked about it. But I think the fact that so many people are outraged. Someone messaged me on social media and said, I tried to explain equality to my children. If I can't explain it to my children, why is that she only got that and they got that? If we can't call it out in that way. And that's why I guess the change is coming. I think it is that young Gen Z, Generation Z, whatever we want to call them, but actually brutally saying, well, that can't be right in terms of equality. So more of that, along with business waking up and recognising that actually there's, not even in the next year, but in the next 5-10 years, this is an opportunity for investment and growth that perhaps we haven't seen in the past.
We should say that Lizzie Digan's team topped up her winnings.
They did,
that race.
sorry,
they shouldn't
fabulous.
have to, should they?
No,
it should be the organisers and the sponsors to start with. You're quite a busy lady. You sit on a lot of boards, Lewis FC and Leisure Focus. You're also a member of the RFU, Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Group. Why is it important to you to volunteer for all these roles across a real range of sports?
Yeah, my husband keeps saying, is anyone going to pay you to be on the board at some point? He says that a lot when I tell him I'm on the board. I guess it's a bit of a giving back. I think in all those board roles, I get far more from the board roles than I give. I like to feel that I do give a lot too. But in terms of what I learn, and I guess about volunteering, isn't it? You feel good in the giving, but I learn and I'm exposed to new people and new ideas and everything. So I think in every board role, you learn so much more from being there and being involved. So yeah, I guess I did let go of a few. A couple of years ago, I stood down from a few. I was chair of the Get Back to Active, and I was sat on the Active Partnership National Board, and I stepped back to create some more space, and then filled it up again with other things. So it's hard sometimes not to say yes to fantastic opportunities, but I try to just go for, like Lewis is a case in point. I have a very busy schedule, but actually I approached Maggie Murphy to ask what I could do and how I could help Lewis, because I feel so aligned to all that they're about. So I guess when the right opportunity comes along, it's hard to turn it down when it feels like it's absolutely the right thing to do.
There might be people listening and people sat here thinking, I have that desire, I want to help, but quite often it's easy to say that we don't have the time. What would you say in terms of encouraging people to make the time and take the chance?
Yeah, I think you do find the time, don't you? I do believe in, and it's that hearing other things over years of needing to make space. So if you're going to add more things on, you've got to decide what it is you're going to give up if you're a busy person. So I do think there is an element of what you're going to let go. You can't just keep adding more and more to it, which I do feel like I might be doing. But finding that space to do. But I think sometimes it's just and this is a bit of what we do with the Women's Sport Collective, is just encouraging women to take that first step. And, I think my first board role was with BASES, the British Association for Sport and Exercise Science. And I'm not really an exercise scientist, that's 30 years ago, but that wasn't really why I did that degree. But I went onto their board to help them commercialise their membership and so on. But for me, it was a gentle start to being on a board that then took the next step to UK Active, and I moved on to other boards too. So I think, just putting your hand up and getting involved in some way is a good place to start.
Well, on the Women's Sport Collective and Fearless Women that you are CEO of as well, For those who don't know, can you tell us about the collective, what it is and why you set it up?
Yes, so the Women's Sport Collective, co-founded with Kate Hannon a year ago, just over a year ago, and it was really created, I guess, out of we had done some stuff in the past at Promote, just getting together amazing females that we'd meet working in sport, and because we were very lucky as an agency to work across different sports, I would sometimes meet someone amazing who was like the commercial director of rowing or CEO of netball or something, and they wouldn't necessarily know the other women across sport in the way that we did. So we did lots of introductions, and then we did a couple of lunches of just bringing them together just to talk and to build their networks too. So we had done that in the past, and then it just felt right at the time of lockdown. I emailed about 70 women and just said, shall we just create something online in a more casual way, just to have a bit of an online network? And obviously it was very timely because no one had anything else to do or no one else to go at that time. So we did a pilot during the summer of 2020. Yes, I've lost a year almost. Yeah, so it's been a year and we're now at 3,200, just over 3,200 members from across the world, about 60 countries, all different levels of sport, just bringing together women working in sport with a chance to learn and share and flourish. And we do monthly webinars, so we have amazing guests that come and talk and share, whether it's personal development, professional development topics. We have monthly networking sessions, we've had a book club, all kinds of stuff. And we're just beginning to meet in person now, which is really exciting. So unsurprisingly, we're off to Lewes FC on Sunday to watch a game there, and we're going to watch the Red Roses play in Northampton in November, and then we're talking to England Netball yesterday about going to watch the Roses play maybe at the Copper Box or up in Leeds. So yeah, exciting to now be getting women together in place. And actually even here at Leaders, it's been amazing both to meet women for the first time that we've been within the collective, but I had some really fantastic conversations with women who lost their jobs or were not in a good place and then came across the collective during lockdown, and it's really transformed how they feel about the sector, and that's quite emotional. It's quite empowering. I guess we do research and we hear that we know it's succeeding because it's growing, and we have that feedback. But actually, when you meet people and they even in their ones and twos, and they tell you what an impact it's had, we're going to get little pin badges for future conferences, so we'll know who's in the collective. But actually, that it's been really powerful from outside. So yeah, it's been great to see it grow, and we set it up completely pro bono and just spent our time on it because, as I say, we weren't busy doing other things. And then as it grew and it took more time, and then there are costs incurred just in terms of your Zooms and MailChimps, we went out to a few partners just to say, could someone just cover our costs? So it's not for profit, but we'd just like to cover our costs. And wonderful Sky Sports stepped forward, the first to come forward and say, absolutely, really happy to be involved. So that's been great for us, not just the funding, which helps just cover our time, but also in terms of the profile and reaching out and working with them too. So that's been really pleased.
And I can say from first-hand experience that those online networking events are great, and you meet people from all different backgrounds, all different levels of their career, and everyone gets so much out of it. What are the themes that you get from the women in those sessions as to the challenges they face and what they need changed to see in the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I never want to talk, it's almost that whole thing about female coaching, isn't it? We want to get more skilled women and more confidence and whatever, and it's like you don't want to change the women, you want to change the system. And I do feel that across sport and generally in work, we want to change the system that makes it easier for women to progress, but I think sometimes we do talk a lot about confidence, about that needing more confidence. And actually, when we have researched the women within the collective, confidence is a huge issue that comes up, that kind of imposter syndrome and having more confidence. So I think definitely that's something that is flagged. I think people want to build their network and their connections in a way that perhaps men have and women haven't had in the past. And I think, so kind of overcoming that imposter syndrome and learning about the sector. We do have women wanting to come along and learn more about the industry and the sector too. So definitely that's kind of, a third piece. And being part of something bigger than themselves, and whether that's bringing through the next generation. And we hear a lot of that with female athletes, don't we, with England, the hockey players and so on, want to inspire the next generation. Lots of the women, right from the very first pilot, want to see more women working in the sector and therefore want to showcase the amazing roles. And I've had conversations today about insight managers and data and where are the women? Why are women not coming through into those roles? So women that are working within the sector, love the sector, want to do more to showcase the roles that are available. So we're definitely Kate and I got so many plans for the future of what we could do. We haven't got enough hours in the day, have we? But I think that's definitely something, is what more the women working in the sector now can do to help showcase what's available to other women for the future.
Can you give us a hint as to what those plans might be between these two great minds?
Oh,
Kate's eyes have just gone very big, which means something exciting.
Watch this space. Lots of exciting things, really.
Okay, I'll keep a firm eye on it. Now, look, we're here recording an episode of the award-winning Game Changers podcast. Why did you start the podcast amongst all your other things, and what were you looking to achieve through it?
Yeah, why did I? It was at Promote that I started the podcast, actually, and I think it was probably similar to the Women's Sport Collective too, but that wanting to celebrate the trailblazing women that were out there making a difference. And I think it's been amazing to have fantastic athletes as guests, but actually some of the women behind the scenes, I think I wanted to share their stories and to learn as well. I think anyone that has the podcast knows it's just amazing. What a privilege to go and talk to those women and find out more too. So it's probably almost like I've created a podcast that I thought wasn't there, that I would like to have listened to, and to find out more, say, about their stories and what they'd overcome and how that could then help other women in the future too.
You've interviewed over 70 guests in the past 2 years, which is a lot, a huge amount. If someone is just finding the podcast for the first time, should they go back to the very beginning? Is there a midpoint? Is there one particular chat that you think encapsulates everything it's about?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to know. We track the metrics and see. And actually, Kate Richardson-Walsh's, which was hers was the very first one I did record, and it's in the first series, is still the most popular of all of them across the 2 years. Not to say to start with that, but she was very natural and relaxed and all those things too. So I think there's almost like the athletes, and they've been really lucky to talk to Jess Ennis-Hill and Denise Lewis and Sarah Story and others, as I say, but there are some, it's almost those sometimes the women I didn't even know before I spoke to them. Someone like Moya Dodd, who was the first woman on the FIFA Council. Rose Riley is like an amazing, just a really funny, amazing story of her incredible career playing football for Scotland and playing in Italy. I'm not really giving you an answer, am I really? Dip in and listen to them all. But I think it's interesting actually, us looking back across that whole catalogue, we're thinking now of how do we better categorise and gather that content, because there is so much fantastic content, and it can be a bit daunting to go, goodness me, there's 70 of them, and we've done 5 series with Barclays, so Fearless Women in Football, where we've also talked to women whose careers touch football, or broadcasters and coaches and so on too. So I'm not really answering your question at all. Listen to them all. No, I think
they're all good.
They are all good. They're all good in different ways. Yeah.
And I believe you have some exciting plans for the Game Changers that you can announce today.
Ta-da, to these people here. Yeah, we're really super excited. So I haven't written the press release yet to say it, but confirmed yesterday that Sport England are going to sponsor and support the next 3 series of the Game Changers to work with us as a partner. So it's really big news. Yeah, we're very really delighted. And actually what's lovely with them is that they sponsored 1 series about 4 or 5 ago, but they really want to collaborate with us and work with us and to look more in terms of definitely a focus on female coaching, which we're really interested in too, to bring that to life more, and just to work with them, and then to take that content, as we said, almost all that content that sits there, so historical content, and then these series moving forward, and to do more webinars and to package it more in terms of education. So all the things we've said actually around the collective about showcasing these amazing roles, so letting women see, younger women see what Emma Hayes is doing and what these jobs entail as a broadcaster or administrator and coach or a CEO of UK Sport, to begin to bring that to life too. So really, really excited about that moving forward.
Well, congratulations, that is great news. Should we talk about the book?
Yes, go on then.
It's great. Game On, the unstoppable rise of women's sport. It's a manifesto, you call it, and a sort of plan for the future. And it was just longlisted for the William Hill Sports Book of the Year just last week. So it's safe to say it's going down very well since it was released a month ago. How delighted have you been with the reception it's had so far?
Yeah, really, really, really pleased actually. Yes. Am I more surprised? I think I am much more surprised. Really, it's been really positive, and it's just lovely. And again, being here, it's lovely hearing from people and people talking to you. Is that kind of nervousness when you write it and it's your baby for a year of kind of editing and shaping it, and then getting it out there and people reading it. That is, was bit of a scary moment. But yeah, it's been really, really positive. I guess one of the most positive things for me is, and I even, we're signing books downstairs now, people all taking the book and saying, this is for my daughter or for my niece or a PE teacher. But actually it's the men that are reading it that's having the biggest impact. And so some of the emails I'm getting from men who are saying, really honestly, it's just completely changed the lens through which I look at sport, and I'd never thought about that. And even my husband didn't read any of it when I was writing it, didn't want to read it, and he didn't even read it when it was in the draft format. He wouldn't read it until it was a book. He's mentioned in it, but he was okay about it. I didn't check with him too, but he read it as a book, and he was, he's got 3 daughters. He's been very much involved in my life and seen. But he came back and said, "I had no idea about this," or opening his mind to things. So I think I do talk about it as a bit of a manifesto and a rallying cry, but I think it's as much about changing hearts and minds. And I worry sometimes, Sally, but about the title of women, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. It is what it is, but does it almost need a different wrap, a different cover to get men to take it and read it? Because actually it's them changing their mindset that might then bring the biggest change that we see moving forward.
I think we just have to make sure we're buying copies for all the men in our life for Christmas. It's coming up, and there's some really interesting information there that even someone who works in women's sport and thinks I know a lot about it, there's some information there that I had no idea about, and it is really eye-opening. I mean, what motivated you to write it? Because you say right at the very start that the inequality of women's sport makes you angry. So there's obviously that anger as a motivator, but why did you decide to sit down and write 300 pages on women's sport? I
think I had always wanted to write a book. I think it's probably that studying English, isn't it? And I think I, like many people, you feel that there's a book inside you. I thought it was a fiction book. I thought I would write a novel, and maybe I still will do one day. So I think a novel is probably where I thought I would write. So I think that kind of came together with all the great content from the Game Changers. And my initial thought was that I would take the Game Changers content of all those interviews, which are just fabulous. And, each of them gets, 3,000-4,000 downloads, but it could go to so many more people, the content. So my initial thought was I would take that content and craft that into a book around the Game Changers. And actually I spoke to an agent who said, actually, follow your journey, go and discover something, go and learn. So he helped me shape, what do they call it, editorial spine or something of that kind of the book, and that was such sound advice. And that's so I was then able almost to write it, but learn in the process too. And although it had a lot of what I did already know, it's been amazing to go, like the history, the science behind women's bodies, so much of it that I didn't know about. So I really have enjoyed the process of coming to it and not thinking I needed to know it all in order to write it. So if anybody else is thinking of writing a book, that's definitely advice I would give. Is almost pick a topic that fascinates and interests you, but use it as a process to go and learn more.
Yeah, my mind was open to just how much of a difference the right sports bra can make.
Oh
when
my
it comes
God,
to
that was
running.
a bit my husband. That was the bit my husband said. I had no idea.
And neither did I.
I know.
Did you have anyone in mind when you wrote it? Obviously, you've just mentioned that actually you kind of want a lot of men to read it, but was there any sort of target audience you were really thinking about?
I think it probably was for the sports, or for those working within women's sport. I feel probably in my head I had that, and it's been interesting that some of the feedback from the publishers send it out to various bloggers. They go, you to go on a blog tour. It's all new to me. And bloggers who have no interest in sport at all read it. So I guess I hoped that people like that might be interested, but actually it's probably a bit too much technical detail, and I think you have to have some element of interest in sport to really get behind it and enjoy it. So I think probably a sporting audience. And I've heard someone else say this now, so I've just stolen this quote, but I do think it's almost like I wrote it for myself 10, 15 years ago. It's definitely, I didn't have me in mind at all when I wrote it, but I just use that now because it sounds good historically. But I think when I think about what's in it, I would love, at that time of the Women's Sport Trust, if I could have picked up a book like that, or when I was working first at Gatorade and seen the history and given myself, I guess it's those arguments, isn't it? That's the thing. I hope it's almost like a guidebook. But when someone says, why do women only pay 3 sets and not 5 like men? Or, they don't deserve the funding because they're not bringing in the crowds. So all that same old. I hope that the book, and I know it is because women and men are telling me it does, it gives them the confidence and the answers almost to call that out, and in a rational way, but at least to have the answers as to why it is where it is and why history's got us into this place and what we all need to do to change it moving forward. So I hoped it would be that, and I think it definitely is. So probably it's written more for anyone with an interest in sport, and people keep buying it for PE teachers and those enthusiastic about sport. So it does feel like it's probably that audience.
You've got the answers for any troll on Twitter when it comes to women's sports now. Just get the book out and give them what they need to do. But was it hard to write? Because some of it as well is very information heavy, and there's a lot of historical context in there, there's facts and figures. Was some of it harder to write than others?
Yeah, I think I guess some of it was completely new to me. So the history part was, I learned so much so that it was learning. Other parts it was almost reporting the bits that I already knew. The chapters towards the end, so the piece on sport for development and the international, that was fascinating, because I didn't really know much about that at all. So that was a lot of learning there. So some bits were harder than others, but I think generally it was all areas that I was fascinated in, like adding more chapters. So it was meant to be 70,000 words. I think it's 86,000 in the end, because I kept saying, could I do a chapter on this, and grassroots participation and femininity and LGBTQ and race and women's sport. So it grew as I kind of went through and added more and more.
You also had quite a lot of personal stuff in there as well, didn't you? Talk quite openly about yourself and, competing in triathlon and struggling with menstrual cycles. Was that difficult, or was that something you felt quite important to do, to put a piece of yourself in there?
Yeah, I think it was important, to be honest. That's some of the feedback I've had from a lovely old friend said, it's very personal. He was a little bit uncomfortable with it. But actually, if we're going to be authentic and real and talk about changing those things, I think I need to be the first to step up and to do that too. So yeah, I think for me, it's not memoir, but it is important that I talked about my journey and how that related to sport. I think that's an important part. It could have just been a book full of facts and figures, but I think the fact that it sits alongside my own journey and my professional journey, as well as my journey and being a mother, and also as an athlete too. So yeah, I was really happy. But it's funny, there are a couple of bits that when people say they've read the book, I think, how far have you got? Have you got to that bit yet? There were some personal bits that in that too.
And it was crowdfunded as well.
Yes,
what difference did that make to the publication process and the writing process?
Yeah, well, my goodness, the publication process itself is the whole world of publishing is something new to behold. And so slow and archaic, I have discovered. So actually, the crowdfunding was a much quicker way. I was on the traditional route, and I was speaking to an agent, and we were talking to publishers, and it just felt like it was going to take forever. And then it's actually Kath Spencer's book, Mud and More Mascara. I've only been to 2 book launches, hers and then mine. I went to her book launch and met her, Unbound, the publisher, and thought, actually, that's fantastic. I could do it much more quickly, get it out there, shape it more. And so we kind of went that route. And what it did mean is that it was quite long. So people were pledging for the book, which is fantastic, and then saying, when's it coming? It's like, I've got to write it. I haven't written it yet. So I think that's a bit of an odd process of getting people to pledge for something. They thought they bought it, or they had bought it, but it hadn't been created yet. So you do that initially first. You get all your crowdfunding done, and then you write your book. But it did mean people were on that journey. So 660 odd people that pledged were on that journey with me. And then when it came to publication, they got it early, and you didn't ask anyone to do this, but people were excited and shared it across social media and talked about it. So they almost become your early ambassadors to share news of the book. So from that side, that's really exciting and really positive.
And nice seeing all their names in the back. I recognise a few colleagues and stuff having a little skin. I was like, nice to see you.
Lovely. And Vitality, a shout out as well. So Vitality came on board as well towards the end and just helped top up that crowdfunding piece, which then helps get more people on board too. Yeah.
So you're clearly still very passionate about driving change in women's sport, in everything you do on multiple platforms. What is it that keeps your passion ignited?
I guess for me, it is about women's sport, and I love women's sport, but it is that bigger piece about women in society and what sport means and what sport can do. And I think that's the piece, and I do talk about this in the book, but that whole sport being so endemically part of all of culture, whether it's in news bulletins or it's in newspapers or the way we talk about it. The fact that there's a massive conference here with all these people, it's just so much part of society. And I think just sport's power to reflect and magnify what's happening in society, but also to drive change in society. So that's a piece for me. And we go back to the whole Paris-Roubaix this weekend in terms of what Lizzie did and the inequality in funding. But having that conversation, does that then trickle out to someone thinking, well, this isn't right for the job that I do here, or this isn't right for how my daughter's being treated or how I'm being treated. So I think for me, it's the power of sport and that profile of amazing athletes to change equality in society. And also all the pieces around women's bodies, not just women because they need to be feminine and beautiful, but women that can be strong and fearless and powerful, and how it makes women and girls see women on stage, front and centre in the way that men are too. So I think that's a bit I probably over time have got more passionate about as I've seen the impact that sport can have more broadly across society.
And I'm sure for this next question you've got some maybe new thoughts after being here for a couple of days. But right now in 2021, what do you see as the key challenges facing women's sport?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So sometimes I think, and we have had a few calls and conversations, I guess, in the last couple of days. For me, sometimes it feels so bloody obvious. It's like, oh my God, there's this amazing opportunity. There's men's sport here, and then there is this huge opportunity in terms of investment and profile and how women's sport is seen driving social change and all those things. And I guess what's fantastic is we're seeing more research that's highlighting that and sharing that now. So for me, it feels really obvious, but I just feel like it's a missing part that people aren't seeing where the opportunity lies. So I think more fantastic open-minded brands, so the likes we mentioned, Google and MasterCard and others, but bigger brands coming in and putting proper money behind women's sport. And then, I'm not calling out because you're on stage, but Sky Sports and BBC and others, and the free-to-air coverage, so getting it in front of people, I think that will make the difference too. So I think it's those many components, and as I've said that conversation earlier, but in terms of governance and changing the structure of sport too. So it is many of those things, but I think for me it's about profile and visibility and people being exposed to it. I'm a massive fan of women's rugby, and that's changed over the years. But how hard have I had to work on a Saturday, whatever, to watch the Allianz Premier 15s on streaming it, and it's 2 cameras from Loughborough and the wind's blowing and I can't quite hear, and I work really hard to see it, and then we'll watch, Harlequins Men on the Friday night, and it's just the most amazing commentary and camera and whatever. So I think that's the piece for me, is the quality. I've said, you asked me one thing and I'm going to give you 5 or 6
great.
But it's that quality of actually taking those fans but giving them a product that lets them see the sport as it really should be seen.
Yeah, not having to work quite so hard to access it. A bit more accessibility. What drives you then moving forwards?
Probably more of the same, really. I do love that we're seeing change, and I think that's exciting. Probably if I was doing what I was doing and we were 10 years ago, I might be off on a different path, exploring something different. But I think it's really exciting to be part of something and seeing that change and again, that we talk a lot about the importance of male allies coming on board. So I think seeing more men, and it's great to see as many men as women in the room here today. So I think that whole seeing men getting it and coming on board and supporting is exciting. But also, we had a women in sport breakfast this morning. It's just amazing, the energy and the power and whatever in the room to go and drive change. You couldn't be there and not be excited about the momentum that's coming and what we can do for women's sport and women across society.
Well, Sue, it's been a joy turning the tables and interviewing you today. I don't know how you found the experience on the other side of it. Yeah, not too bad. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to everybody for being here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Hannah for hosting that session. As we mentioned, the Game Changers has just received a grant from Sport England, so we're busy planning the next 3 series, and we'll have new episodes for you to hear very soon. In the meantime, please head over to fearlesswomen.co.uk, where you can find out more about all my game-changing guests and listen to the previous episodes. You can also sign up for Changing the Game, our weekly newsletter that highlights the developments in women's sport, and find out about the Women's Sport Collective, a free network for all women working in sport. The website is also where you can order signed copies of my book, Game On, which you'll also find in all good bookshops and everywhere online, including Amazon, Waterstones and bookshop.org. Do get in touch via social media, where you'll find me on Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram at Sue Anstiss. I look forward to sharing the stories of more amazing females with you very soon. The Game Changers. Fearless women in sport.